Hello and welcome to Therapy Chat with Phoenix Behavioral Health. I'm Dr. Dawn Parks, and today we're going to be talking about stress management and mindfulness. Last episode we covered a lot about stress, and we were talking about some of the ways that we could address stress, manage stress, and actually make it work with us for us in some cases. So today we're going to talk about one of the major things that we can learn that can help us identify and manage stress. And today I have Coach Derek with us.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. So Derek, just to review a little bit about what we were talking about last week, we had defined stress really as any change that happens, you know, whether it's physical, emotional, or psychological. And we'd also said that stress is mostly defined by how you respond to it.
Definitely.
Right? And then we also talked about, and we put up a graphic about some of examples that could be considered potentially stressful, like change of a job and loss of a loved one, moving to a new place.
Definitely.
And we'd also talked a little bit about the difference between normal stress, which we call eustress, which is completely normal and healthy, and that little bit of stress that we feel sometimes can give us the confidence and the energy to go on stage and perform or to give a presentation. But the issue can be when it gets out of control,
right,
and it gets unmanageable.
Absolutely. That's the biggest thing, is that, you know, stress, the biggest thing we want to do is we want to contain it, because I found out in the past working with clients that stress would very much tend to have a snowball effect. Mm-hmm. And the thing is with stress is it starts affecting you before you even really know it. Mm-hmm. Before you even know it, your heart's racing. It could be triggered by the environment you're in. Let's say you're worried about school. Well, let's say, first of all, before we even get to the school or workplace, that you have an assignment due. It could be for school or work. It's interrelated. It's the same. Instead of being worried about, you know, just going to work, now you will find that your heart starts racing, but when you get in the car or when you even leave your house in the beginning, because now, even though you haven't set foot into the workplace or the school, your mind is already flooded with worries, because you've probably been thinking about it overnight. So now it's affected your sleep. Now you feel off balance when you wake up. Now you're reaching for coffee and all sorts of releases, and which is going to make your heart rate and your breathing go even quicker. So, I might be exaggerating, but now you have what I call a big wreck, because before you even gotten to your school or work, you already, you know, your heart's racing, you're pounding the coffee down, and you're just not setting yourself up for good success, because instead of going back and doing your breathing to calm down, you've been reaching for things that you think are going to be the cure, but it's just putting you in a worse situation than you were, all because of an assignment you had due, or the environment even. You know?
And as you said, oftentimes that stress response can be triggered when you're not even in a stressful situation, but just thinking about it.
Because your mind's always working, it's always planning ahead. Your conscious thoughts are not what your brain is focusing on all the time too. You know, when you go somewhere, or when you call someone, or when you undo the lock in your combination, you don't have to think about it for 20 minutes. You just know it, because it's your brain's always working. So it's just in a retrieving state. So if you get a call from work, or if you do something that reminds you in the slightest bit of that environment, it's going to be problematic because you've just opened a whole array of triggers. Yeah,
right,
essentially.
Right. And when that trigger happens, that's when we kind of wake up that fight or flight. And the third one, freeze response, right? And as we said, once that's triggered, it's completely normal. There's not an issue with it. But what becomes an issue is when it stays triggered and at a high level for a long time.
Definitely.
Then that can compromise our mental health and our physical health.
Because now you have the snowball effect, like we said. The eating, the sleeping, going to sweets, drinking too much coffee.
Yeah.
It's all starts to circle back and create a big mess.
So if you imagine this balance, and right here in the middle, where my watch is, right, there's a small area here in the center that where we could call that eustress that we were talking about a few minutes ago.
Certainly.
Healthy, normal, everyday stress. The problem happens when it gets out of balance, right? Too much this way, too much that way. We can develop things like anxiety, depression, all kinds of issues. Upset stomach. We showed a lot of those potential effects.
We highlighted a lot of those in the last episode.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the biggest question is, how do we get that back into a nice, centered, balanced state, right? Because when we're stressed, physiological things like an increased heart rate, right, sweating, muscle tension, all of those things are happening. We may be aware, we may not be aware of those things.
Essentially, yes.
And so, mentioning very, very briefly, activities like regular exercise, right? Hobbies, things that we really enjoy. We can find all of those things very relaxing and very helpful to kind of bring that back into balance. But we also talked last week about the fact that when we are stressed, we tend to let those things go, right? So we may have been doing a little bit of exercise, having a few hobbies here and there, and then now the stress, whether it's work-related or relationship-related, becomes so high that little by little we start to let things go. We no longer go for walks. We no longer go to the gym. We don't meet with friends. We don't really engage in anything much at all. And so we can tend to isolate. And that is also when drug use, substance abuse, drinking can really become a big issue as well.
Because it just numbs the pain. It doesn't cure the cause, or it doesn't deal with the triggers. But all it does is mask the symptoms. It just deals with the symptoms, but it doesn't cure what's really bothering you.
So another issue, and this is the issue that we're going to talk about today, specifically mindfulness, is a way to help bring everything back into balance. And mindfulness, and we can, as we can read on our first graphic, is an awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. This was a definition that was given by John Kabat-Zinn, who is the founder of the Center for Mindfulness at UMass Worcester.
Okay.
Mindfulness, in a sense, is a very, very, very ancient practice, right? But it started to really be incorporated into the Western world and to be integrated with medical practices as well as traditional psychotherapy. So if we take that statement and look at it in little parts, mindfulness is awareness. What is awareness? Awareness that is being in the moment, being here right now,
Because mindfulness is the opposite of anxiety, if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because anxiety is the desire to escape the present moment,
Mm-hmm.
but mindfulness is exploring the present moment
Mm-hmm.
instead of escaping it.
Right.
Mindfulness is just being here now.
So I'm sure that you may have had, or our viewers may have had the experience, for example, that you're driving along somewhere that you go to frequently. You might be driving to work, and you arrive at work and you say, I don't remember getting here. I don't actually remember. How many people did I see on the way? How busy was it?
You feel like you just teleported there.
Exactly.
You feel like you just got there.
Something that I do frequently is so automatic that I don't even know. I'm not even aware of it.
Because you're just running.
Yeah,
You're
and
just
that can happen with relationships too. We have a family member, for example, that we're so familiar with them that we don't really pay attention. We come home and we say, hi, I've just got to go and do this and this, and we don't really we're not fully in the moment, right?
Sure.
So that first part of that definition, an awareness that arises through paying attention, right? We know that we're here, right? We're aware of what's happening, and we're paying attention on purpose, right? Because we can very easily get distracted. There's so many things that are happening, hearing, seeing, through any of the senses, stimulations that are coming from everywhere, and it's very easy to kind of get off task or to try to multitask. So choosing to fully focus my attention onto speaking with you right now, or to drinking my orange juice
out of your Phoenix mug
right now.
Yeah.
It makes such a difference, you know. I'm sure that we've all been in a situation where we're talking to someone and they don't really seem to be listening. They're kind of distracted.
They're just not here. Yeah.
So being in the moment and being aware and paying attention on purpose.
For sure.
And the last part of that definition is non-judgmentally. We tend to, just as human beings, tend to kind of make judgments. And part of that, you know, we're scanning, you know, is this a safe person, a safe situation or not? So that's a normal thing to be able to assess the people who are around us and our environment. But oftentimes we can take that a little too far and be constantly judging someone else or judging ourselves.
For sure, yes. So
if we could just do a very, very short 15-second tryout of this mindfulness technique. It's just sitting here, just sitting wherever you are, and just being aware of your thoughts.
Right.
And your breath. Taking that time to be centered.
To think about what's going on now.
To be grounded.
Not the future. Not what you're going to do when you get home. Just being here now in the present moment.
And just that little practice can give us more awareness and insight into how we think. We can kind of stand back and see our busy mind.
Absolutely.
Right? So instead of being stuck in the middle of traffic at rush hour, we're actually at the side of the road watching all the traffic.
Absolutely.
We're watching our busy mind, and we're realizing we don't have to constantly get caught up in all the chaos. We can step back and take some time out. Okay. So when we do that, and when we practice our relaxation techniques such as slowed breathing. You mentioned briefly last week releasing tension from the body, tightening the muscles, and
Least amount of tension necessary.
there you go. That can help bring the whole system back into balance. There's one very, very, very important nerve called the vagus nerve,
Yes.
which is a major nerve, originating from the brainstem and wrapping around all the organs, and especially having effects on digestion, on heart rate, on breathing rate, on tension in the body, and a lot of other major functions in the body. Okay, so when we practice our calmed breathing or our slowed breathing, that immediately brings the vagus nerve online.
Yes.
Right? Because the vagus nerve, when there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress, it kind of can get put offline because we're in that fight or flight response,
So you're off center.
and it's maintained there, and we're off balance, right? So one of the easiest, simplest things to do, we don't need to take anything with us, we can do it
Nope.
anywhere, is our awareness of breath.
Oh, okay.
And oftentimes our breath is used as a focal point as well. Why? Because we have it. And so if we focus on each breath, then immediately it's going to bring us into the moment.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's it's hard to do it these days because ever since you're a child, you're taught to get as much done as possible, to do as much as possible. And one thing that you're not taught to do is how to relax when it's
Exactly.
time to not do anything.
Yeah.
Sometimes the answer is nothing, because you have an example you like to use too, that you taught me, which was what makes up a room. And I said, 4 walls. You said, is that it? And no, it's the space, it's the nothing between the walls that makes it a room.
The space. Right. So our next graphic is going to illustrate some of the benefits that mindfulness has, regular mindfulness practice has on not just the body but also mental health. And there's a lot of benefits because when we can calm the mind, we have more clarity. We can think more clearly. We can see more clearly. When we get stressed and anxious, it kind of makes everything in our head fuzzy, and it's hard.
It's too much.
Exactly. It's overwhelming. And so perhaps a simple problem becomes a major problem, and it's really hard to function the best that I can function. Because everything's kind of hazy and unclear. So if I can calm my system down, right, and practice this daily mindfulness, and it doesn't have to be 45 minutes every day,
Right.
just a few minutes is all that's needed to make a big difference. That's going to help calm my mind, and it's going to create clarity of thinking, clarity of thought, help me solve problems, because I'm taking that little step back. So now I can clearly see what's going on in my life and where I may need to make changes. And I know, with coaching, you do have clients who often come to see you for that reason, for stress management. It may not be to the point that it's clinically involved, but still.
The first steps.
Yeah.
The first steps when you're not able to enjoy everyday, activities, when you start having the racing thoughts, when you start worrying, when you start to have that feeling that you might not be able to put your finger on it, but just something
Right.
is off.
Right.
And then we try to step into identifying triggers,
Mm-hmm.
doing deep breathing,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to find out what that is.
Mm-hmm.
My go-to is, the deep breathing, the
The
least
deep
amount of
breathing.
tension necessary.
Yeah.
Being able
Yeah.
to identify triggers
Yeah.
and not letting them bother you.
Right. And just a very quick thing for the deep breathing. I mean, there's a lot. You'll see a lot of different breathing techniques, but the main thing when we're trying to calm down and trigger the relaxation response, which is mediated by that vagus nerve, is to, when we breathe in, pause just for a second and then make that exhale as long as we can.
For sure.
So it might be, you might do it to a count of breathing in 2, 3, 4, pause, then breathing out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, pause, right?
Mhm.
Then you'll find after a relatively short time, perhaps a minute or two, that you're starting to feel the benefits of feeling a little calmer. Mhm.
Definitely.
Another one on our graphic promotes emotional stability, right? That emotional balance. When there's a high stress level, it can feel that every emotion is just so powerful, I can't get out, I can't get away from it, right? It's
Mhm.
kind of like being in a hole and there's water coming
You
in
feel
and
like
I
the
can't
walls
climb
are
out.
closing in on you,
Exactly.
or like you're being chased.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it gives me the ability to be a little more empowered, actually a lot more self-empowered. I know that these emotions are there, I'm aware of them, right? But I know that I do have a choice in whether I respond and in
That's
how
part of
I
identifying
respond.
the triggers as well, too.
Yes.
Knowing what triggers you, knowing what's going to cause you to feel off balance.
Mm-hmm.
And there's small triggers and there's big triggers,
Yeah. Yeah.
But being able to identify all of them
Mm-hmm.
and being able to come to terms with each one is what's going to save you essentially
Yeah.
from a lot of trouble
And
and sleepless nights.
I did have someone from last week's session who contacted us asking, well, so what's the difference between stress and trauma? So the main difference between stress and trauma is that in stress, there's still some possibility of responding in some way. Either I might decide to run away, turn away, or not engage. I may decide I want to take this on and work through it. I may see that there's a few different options, right? In a trauma response, there is nothing, there is no option left. And remember, we said a few times that this can be factually, this can be real, or it can be just, this is what I fully believe, right?
Definitely.
If I believe that there is nothing that I can do, there's no way I can survive this, there's no way I can get out of this, then I'm going to just collapse and freeze, and then I can go into a trauma response. And you of course, we'll see this much more with children and childhood trauma, because as a child, there's not much you can do. If there's a highly stressful or traumatic situation, there's not much I can do.
Starts to shape your identity,
Mm-hmm.
essentially.
Mm-hmm. Now, some other benefits of mindfulness, it's going to help me. It's going to cultivate an observing attitude. It's going to give me the ability to be able to stand back a little bit, not get so caught up. Be able to say, "Oh, wait a minute, what's another option?"
To be able to freeze the response, because you want to take time to actually process it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing.
Exactly.
You don't want to just suddenly be triggered and start jumping around.
Yeah. So we're saying, reacting, rather than reacting, I'm acting. right? A lot of times we can get
yes.
into a lot of issues or bad situations because we react immediately to the action of the other or the situation or the emotion that we feel. And we have that little bit of space, that importance of that space that you talked about, to step back and say, I don't have to get caught up in this.
No.
There may be a different way. So now I act, right, which is involving a little bit more thought and reflection, right, before I take action. So unfortunately, we're coming to the end of this session, and there's so much more to talk about with mindfulness. There's so much and so many benefits of practicing mindfulness and integrating that into daily life. So for now, we have to stop, unfortunately.
Time goes by quick.
Viewers, if you have any questions or thoughts about what we talked about today, or if you'd like us to talk about any specific topic related to mental health, you can contact us at drparks@phoenixinfo.online, or you can call us at 508-623-3931. And next week we will be talking about early recovery from alcohol and other drug addictions. Thank you and take care.